Hello, and welcome to Magic is Real, a podcast focused on exploring the fascinating world of near-death experiences, communication with spirit, and all things metaphysical and spiritual. The mission of this project is to share messages of hope and inspiration with others, and to spread the word that death is only an illusion. Thank you for being here with an open heart and mind. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Hello, Magic is Real listeners. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for being here. As you can see, I'm a little sick. It's okay. I'm good. Um, just excuse any coughing that may come up during this interview. But today I want to welcome Jack Morrigan. He is a spiritual healer and guide. That's what we decided? Yes. He's a
That's it.
spiritual healer and guide. He has a really interesting story about what led him to doing this work that involves a Kundalini awakening. And if anyone is unfamiliar with the word, is Kundalini, I suppose is the way most people pronounce it, that I understand to be the energy of one's soul, essentially. I
Yeah, I think so. Something like that. I mean, I don't even really know a huge amount about it, but it happened to me. So I can explain what happened to me.
Yeah, I actually had to look it up today, even though I know the term. I do yoga.
Mm,
I've never actually stopped to think. I just thought it was just a name for it. So today I looked it up, and basically it just means the essence of your soul, the energy of your soul. So
mm,
thank you so much for being here, Jack. Um,
mm.
Tell me a little bit about what it is that you do when you coach people and when you do healings.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that the Kundalini, it changed my consciousness and the way that I experienced life. So before then, I didn't see or feel energy in any like particularly strong way. But since I had that experience, I've seen this kind of golden light, which I see inside people and radiating out from people, and I can feel it inside myself, in my heart. Um, and I didn't know what that was, but over the years, I've realized that's probably like the light of the soul, or the light of their being. And the reason I can feel it inside myself is because we share that same being. So when I'm doing a session with somebody, it's like I go into a slightly altered state of consciousness, and I can just see that light shining from them, and I focus on that. And I notice that as people speak more from their heart and they're kind of unburdening themselves of certain difficulties, that light becomes brighter, you know. And I can see that happening. And I think by bearing witness to that light and the person while they're being vulnerable and opening their heart, it has a strong energetic effect that helps that person to release and unburden themselves of something. Also, something that opened up more recently is a connection with Mother Earth through my feet. So I can feel the flows of energy that move through her, and I can see how that connects to the person's experience, because we're so intimately connected to Mother Earth, and she has a memory of every experience we have. And there's ways of kind of energetically connecting her knowledge of us with what's happening inside somebody's body. I don't know I know almost nothing about shamanism, but I've heard people talk about soul retrieval, and I think something like that is what happens when I work with people.
That's really interesting. And I assume that if you can sort of see that light, it allows you to be a guide because you can see
Mm.
their energy expanding and becoming more light, and you know that you're on the right track in that sense. And then, yeah, and then when you shift into that, how do you shift into that consciousness? Is it something you decide and intend and it happens automatically, or do you have to go into a meditation first of some sort to get into that zone?
It, So it kind of happens automatically. Since I've been doing sessions with people, one of the interesting things is that it's like the light knows when the session is going to be,
Hmm.
because I experience the shift in consciousness before I start the session, even if I'm not really thinking about the session all that much. It's like, oh, okay, like it must be nearly time.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like I'm a conduit for that light, really, and it's the light that's doing the session.
Yeah.
Uh, and and it's all very spontaneous, really.
Yeah, I can relate with that. When I do mediumship readings, I actually do a whole thing just for my own self. I just do a little bit of a ritual, but it only needs to be 5 minutes, really. But I notice
Mm,
that spirit knows. The spirit knows it's time to work. And that's
yeah.
even just because I listened to a little 5 minute awaken your third eye in 5 minutes thing on YouTube. And the minute that
Mm,
the little, it's from Taos Winds, is the name of the channel. And I noticed that as soon as the little bell goes off, just it starts, it's sort of their little, it's like comes along with the logo. It just goes bing. And all of a sudden I start to feel spirit come in because spirit knows when I hear that sound, it means we're ready to work. And I think that's really
right, right.
interesting. I've gotten to the point where I used to feel like I had to meditate for 15 minutes to get into it and sometimes longer, sometimes an hour. And now it's just okay, now we can shift, which is really cool.
Mm.
Before now we will of course go into the whole thing that led you here, but when you were growing up and before this all happened to you, were you spiritual? How were you raised?
Yeah. So I wasn't spiritual at all. Like I was atheist and quite like dogmatically atheist. Um, quite like quite harsh and ruthless. Kind of like I was like science has all the answers. Like that was
Mhm.
the kind of mindset that I had. And it's like, well, if I was to look at somebody like me now, I'd be like, they're a charlatan, like they're just only negatives, I would be saying. Um, so yeah, I was like that for like until I was about 26, and it all changed literally just one day, like um, a total turnaround. And that was because a friend of mine had recommended an Eckhart Tolle video, um, and she was like, "Oh, he's a spiritual teacher," and I had no idea what a spiritual teacher was. Like I had to Google spirituality, or like yeah, I think that's what I did. Googled spirituality because I didn't know what it meant. But I watched one of his videos anyway, and I barely even heard the words that he was saying. I was just looking at him, and similarly to how I am in sessions now, I just saw light glowing like inside him, and it was like everything else, like in my vision, kind of almost disappeared. Like um, my mind was just becoming concentrated on this image of him, and I'm just like, why is this guy glowing? You know, no background in spirituality, completely scientifically minded. And that happened. And then I tried to meditate for the first time, just spontaneously. And I was watching my thoughts because I thought that, that's just what you're supposed to do. And they slowed down. And then after a while of watching them, they just completely stopped. Like, so there were just like no verbal thoughts in my mind, no images of anything. Um, and I remember just opening up my eyes and looking around my room and being just like in awe, because everything that I was looking at like just looked like it was translucent and like radiating light. Um, and I just felt this really deep peace inside myself. And I was in that state for about 20 minutes, I think. Um, and then I came out of it and I was like, what was that?
Yeah, now this was just a regular old meditation that you were doing yourself? Wasn't
Yeah.
guided?
No, so it wasn't guided.
Yeah.
I watched one of his videos, I think, and then I saw that there was another one that had a title called How to Stop Thinking.
Mhm.
And I was just like, oh, I don't think I've ever tried to stop thinking.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was just like, oh, I should try and meditate. Like, you know, when kind of spirit is basically doing everything, but yeah,
Yeah.
you don't realize that's what's happening.
Yes.
And I just sat on my bed and I was like moving my hands in and out and following my breath. Like I literally didn't know anything about meditation. And so I was doing all of that instinctively. But it worked, like it absolutely worked. Um, yeah. So after that, I had a very different view of things. I was
Yeah.
like, what is this?
Yeah. What did you surmise was happening?
I had no idea. I had no
Yeah.
idea. Like yeah, I'd been into like drugs and stuff and wasn't having a good time in my life. You know, the sort of the classic story. Um, and what I'd it was like I was having a really, really good drug experience
Mhm.
without any drugs. So I was like, what is this? Like no one said this was an option.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. And so what led you to finding out about I know that the story of when you had this awakening, was it just this, well, of course it was this moment, but then did it lead you to seeking out other forms of meditation or Kundalini awakening? It looks, I know that you started to read some literature about this or
Yeah,
watch videos or whatever form it took.
yeah. So to start with, I'd had this experience and it was straight off the back of watching an Eckhart Tolle video. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what's happened, but he obviously does because like he's the one who has
Yeah.
started this. So I just watched some of his videos, and I did it really slowly. Like I wasn't consuming tons and tons and tons of information. It was just like little bites. And I would go in and out of that state, over the following weeks and months. Like, and it was it's really beautiful to think about it because it felt like Eckhart Tolle was just sort of holding my hand, like, and just guiding me in and out of these things, like with his presence more than
Oh, and he's
anything.
such a sweet man. That's so
Yeah,
comforting.
yeah, I know. He's so relaxed. I think I might have read The Power of Now. I don't even know if I did. But at some point, I think maybe 6 months or so after that first experience, um, I'd heard, I think it was Eckhart talking about Ramana Maharshi and talking very highly, speaking very highly about him. So I was like, oh, okay, well, if this guy who is sort of initiated me into these new experiences in life is talking highly about this guy, then I should check him out. And I downloaded just this little pamphlet that he has called Nanya, which means "Who am I?" And I just, in the course of a week, I just kind of like read it. It's really short, and it's based on just one teaching, really, which is to question who you are. So whenever a thought arises in your mind, you say, to whom does this thought arise? Right? Who does it arise to? The answer will always be me. And then when that arises, you say, who am I? And by bringing your mind, like, I don't, it's so difficult to describe how it works, but it's just somehow it silences the mind. I think Ramana says it kind of turns the mind in on itself, like
Hmm.
back towards the source, because it can't answer that question. And by seeking to answer that question, it kind of naturally just returns to its source. And every time I do it, my mind just goes silent. Um, so he said, just do it all the time. So anytime a thought arises, do that. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. No idea about what could possibly happen if I did that.
Yeah.
Just this guy, he's enlightened. Being enlightened is like being in that wonderful state that I had a taste of all the time. So I'll just really try to do that. And so for about a week, I was just doing it all the time. Um, and my mind, like, it kind of built this rhythm up so that I didn't need to try to do it. Like, I wasn't mentally, the words, who am I, wasn't going through my mind. It was like an impulse of just a thought would arise and I would just turn it back on itself, just to still my mind. And I did that over and over and over again for this week, to the point that I was having dreams and I was doing it in dreams. You know, it was like so kind of habitually
Yeah.
focused, that I was just doing it automatically. And eventually, at one point, I was in a lucid dream, and there was a teacher in front of me, and he was sat cross-legged, and he gave me this teaching. He said, feel the awareness in your left hand, feel the awareness in your right hand. The hands are different, the awareness is the same. And because I was following along while he was saying that, like, I really felt the difference, you know, to noticing like the duality of form, that I have two hands, but that what knows each of those hands is the same thing. So it created this kind of recognition in my consciousness, you know, of unity. And what that did in the dream was that it made the dream collapse. Like, it's like the whole thing just kind of got sucked in on itself. And I experienced this feeling as if my spine was just like spinning backwards, like 360 degrees. Like, it can't spin round like that. There was this really loud crack. And then I was in total darkness. Yeah, give me a second. I think I need some water.
Yeah.
It's funny because talking about it kind of it sort of focuses my mind, like it heightens my energy.
Yeah. I know, because when I talk about mediumship things or spirit, I start to go to that place as well.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
and suddenly I'm like, oh, now spirit's coming in here because I'm talking about it. Or it's talking about them and they're like, oh, hi. So yeah, you
That's
rang.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so I was in this just darkness. And this is where my experience feels similar to a near-death experience, um, which is why sometimes I think of it as a near-death-like experience.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I was just in darkness, and then in the distance there was this point of light, and the point of light started to grow. And as it grew, I sensed this real fear in me, like really deep primal fear, and also an ecstasy, which I would describe as like an orgasm, like the sensation of an orgasm. And they were all growing at the same time. So more light, more fear, more orgasm, just constantly becoming more and more and more, like turning up a dimmer switch. Um, and it got really, really intense. like, like not the kind of thing that you would, like, I wouldn't just want this to happen kind of
Yeah.
again, sort of thing. It's
A little
like really
overwhelming.
pretty overwhelming. Yeah. It literally felt like I was dying, like, and that I was gonna die, like I was in the process of dying, like the fearful part of me felt like I was being ripped apart, like right at my core, like my essence. Um, which is it's not the kind of, it doesn't translate very well, I don't think, into regular human experience, because you can't really know what that's like until you feel something like that. But it's very unnerving. But because like the light was beautiful, you know, this beautiful golden light, and the orgasm was like obviously a pleasurable sensation. So it's like, okay, I know that the light is good and it's a good idea to kind of go into this thing. But once it got really close, I was like, if I cross over this threshold that I can feel between myself in the darkness and this light, I'm going to die. Like, on a really fundamental level, like I'm going to be eradicated kind of thing. And that was just too much. It's like, okay, I can sense that this is really a really good place to be, but I don't have the will to choose to cross over into that. But what I think happened was, because I could feel this presence with me at the time, I think, well, my theory was that I just kind of, because I'd been so focused on the meditation, it had built up a kind of power almost.
Mhm.
And that would, in the end, that just pushed me over. I sort of see it as that it's like, you know, like a kid that's like scared to get in a swimming pool or something, and
Yeah.
like, and parents just kind of watching them suffer because they can't decide whether or not to get in, and
That
eventually just
that
gives
kid
them
was me.
Right.
I
Yeah.
never passed the polywog level of swimming because and they sent me home and told my mom, "This isn't working out." So,
Oh, okay.
great analogy.
um yeah, like, so I think it was that kind of almost like a little parental push, like, okay, they've suffered enough, like they need to get in there. And it felt like that. And then, so when I crossed over, like the fear just completely disappeared, as if it had never been there at all, like not even a trace of it or anything, which was lovely. Like, because I think we have that fear with us all the time to some extent. And to be in a place where it wasn't there, like, was just this really like freeing, like unburdening kind of feeling.
Yeah.
So that was really, really lovely. Um, and all I could see was golden light. It was just everywhere. Um, just like this ocean, really, but it like doesn't really have, didn't really have depth, but an ocean seems like the best description. Um, and this orgasm feeling, like it was just that. So it was just like light plus orgasm, basically. Um, and like not changing, like, so just like really intense and just
Oh,
so.
and just to sort of ask about that, or to ask about that, um, when we talk about orgasm from a physical perspective, it is a sexual thing. Did it feel like that, or did it feel, was it sort of the closest thing you can describe, but it's happening to your whole entire being? That's
Yeah,
what I'm imagining,
yeah,
as opposed to being sort of like loins centered.
yeah, it didn't feel like, like I was having sex, but
Yeah,
if I could kind of extract the sensation of an orgasm, and then
yeah,
just kind of, yeah, like have it be the only thing, like it's everything that I'm experiencing.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. Like very clean, I think would be
Hmm.
another word that would describe it well. Um, like, because when I think of it being sexual, there's like lots of other things happening in a sexual situation.
Yeah,
None of that was there.
of
So it
course.
was
Yeah.
just this like very clean, like orgasm sensation, which is really intense, like to be in for a long time.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, I would
a
imagine.
weird thing to be experiencing,
Yeah.
especially with no background. Like I had no prior knowledge of this or anything. I don't think I'd even seen any near-death experience accounts or anything at this point. So I had no idea that a human being could experience something like this. And then I was just like thrust into this experience. So I don't know how long I was there. It was like really difficult to gauge time. But at some point I was worried about my body, like that my body was okay. And when I thought that, I came back in my body, and I was dripping with
All right.
sweat.
So
Like,
Zoom keeps breaking up, but we're going to start with the point where you said that you were sweating, which you've
yeah,
had to kind of go over several times to get Zoom where it needs
sure.
to be. But all
Yeah,
right. So you were drenched in
technical issues.
sweat.
I was, yeah. So I came back into my body. I was absolutely drenched in sweat. My spine was in this really strange posture. It was like kind of really straight, like really, really rigid, kind of unnaturally. And there was this energy moving up and down my spine, and it had the same orgasmic quality to it as had been in the light. Um, and it came up to my neck, so it didn't go all the way up like some people talk about. And after a while, I just passed out. Basically, I was just so exhausted. Um, yeah. So that was like the main Kundalini thing. I didn't find out until I don't know how long afterwards that that was Kundalini. Um, like I hadn't heard of it. So yeah,
I
it
hadn't
was
heard it either
interesting.
until I saw your testimonial
Right.
testimony. I actually hadn't thought of that either, which is why I just looked
Mm.
it up. I
Yeah.
just, like I said, I thought it was just some fancy spiritual yoga word.
Mm. Yeah, like it's no, it's like a really real thing, like really physical. And I assume that every single person has it.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, after that first experience as well, in the following days, I had like almost like aftershock kind of experiences where I experienced the same kind of thing happening. And in one of those, I felt the sensation at the like base of my spine, and it started to kind of like spiral, like
Hmm.
this spiraling, unraveling feeling before it went up, which like fits so well with like this idea of the Kundalini serpent. Like I can totally see why that's used as an analogy for this because it's just so fitting.
Yeah. Was it something that happened at inopportune times where you were terrified, like, oh no, it's gonna it's gonna happen now, like a seizure, while you're,
Yeah,
at work or on the on the tube or something. But
yeah.
um, yeah, how
Like
did
I
that
was
go for you?
worried about that. Yeah, like, I think that's a really, really important thing to bring up because, like, I think this experience, because I wasn't ready for it, it traumatized me,
Yeah.
and I was worried that it would happen again. Like I remember being at work and just being sat on my chair and being like, hang on, what if it happens now?
Yeah.
Like,
And
like,
did you, yeah,
well, that's,
did
oh,
you
sorry.
immediately, sorry, did you immediately start seeing light around other people, or was your perception changed as well of everything?
Yeah. It took a while for that. I think it was a week or two. But it was when I was at my brother's house. I was just at his house and I started noticing like this. It's like there's like a pulsating quality to it,
Hmm.
like almost like static, but it's like static made of light. Um, and that started when I was at my brother's apartment. And I didn't mention anything to him because I was like, he's just going to think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took a couple of weeks, I think, for that to start. And once it started, like that was it. Like it's always been there, like ever since.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you have that perception switch. I remember maybe a few years ago, only a few years ago, did I notice that dark isn't really dark, it's static. Because there are molecules and it's made up of a lot of particles and things like that. And I wasn't sure if it was a spiritual thing as much as just noticing. All of a sudden, my perception changed from, oh, this is a dark room to, oh, wait, I see all the little fuzzy, I can see all the, I'm seeing if it's sort of echoing a little. I can see all the little dots, like it's like a Monet painting. And,
Oh,
and so now when I turn off the light, that's all that I see. All I see are
right.
shapes and and static. I don't see just a room in the dark.
Yeah, yeah. That same. I have that same experience.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very similar. Like when I've got my eyes open, there's this static, but it's slightly different if I close my eyes.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it can take on shapes if I go into it in that way, which sounds similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and as we were talking about it, I started to see your aura forming because, then I just realized as I'm focusing on you, I can see the outline of your energy as well, which is really interesting. I don't see
Uh,
auras the way that some people do. And so
mm,
uh my what was my question going to be? It was why how do you understand it from whatever research you've done? What's actually happening when this is occurring? What is it that causes this effect from a spiritual perspective? Because there really is no other perspective.
oh, that causes the effect of like seeing the light.
Well, that and all of it. I mean, what's actually happening when you're having this experience? Is it shattering your reality? Is it your brain suddenly seeing what's really there and sort of shutting that part of your brain down? Or is it like I mean, what is actually happening when I don't know how to explain it, but what do you think is actually happening that's causing this sort of trip that you're having without drugs?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or like what's happening to your soul versus your mind in
Yeah.
this moment?
That's a good way of putting it. So I think what happened was like the intense meditation. It caused like my mind to kind of descend into my heart, something like that. This is my way of explaining it. This isn't like some,
Yeah, say that one more
I don't
time
know.
because you cut out a little bit. It's your
Okay.
mind, what?
My mind descending into my heart.
Descending into your heart. Okay, good.
So I think that's what the meditation does. And it kind of feels like that. Like I feel more centered here. And I think by keeping it there for a certain amount of time, it was, um, it's like awareness was able to use my mind to burn through some of the energy of ignorance that was held
Mm,
inside my heart. And that, I don't know how, but somehow that triggers this whole Kundalini experience and the whole tunnel of darkness moving into the light, being in this ignorant darkness and moving into a divine light. It kind of all fits together very well. Um, and what I've found, like when I work with people, I had a kind of intuitive understanding that what was happening was that when I go to this altered state of consciousness, I'm intentionally moving my mind down into my heart. And then I can see the light of the other person because I'm looking through my heart
yeah,
and I can feel their energy and I can work with it in that way because I'm centered in my heart, but all our hearts are interconnected, in one heart. So to bring ourselves into one of them means to connect with all of them.
right. That makes sense. Yeah, it's the same thing with spirit connection. We drop our awareness into somewhere. It's different for everybody. For me, it's sort of my chest cavity that I focus on,
Mm,
as well as the third eye. But when I'm connecting with someone, and which is separate from connecting with their loved ones in spirit, but you're just sort of trying to blend energy. It is shifting your awareness from your head to your heart. Essentially, it could
mm,
come. Some people prefer their abdomen or something, but for me, that always feels more resonant is in my heart, and then
mm,
just shifting that awareness to a different plane of awareness. So it sounds like that. And I also wonder if this is why I actually know a guy who is Egyptian, and he told me that yoga is against his religion. And I thought, I wonder why. I mean, it's just stretching. Like what, at the time, I'm like, it's
mm,
just stretching and breathing. And yeah, it can be spiritual. It can be spiritual because you're in meditate. It's a moving meditation. So basically, that was my idea of it because I do yoga. It's like basically all I'm doing is just stilling my mind and focusing on the breath and the movement to take myself out of my head and just be more in my body, and not even necessarily connecting with some greater thing. But I wondered why it's against some people's religion. And I wonder if there isn't some fear around what can happen And if you're letting in, I'm sure there might be a fear of you're letting in dark energies or something that's not God. I'm sure. Do you
Yeah,
know anything about that? Why?
I think that's a really, really interesting question. And I think something that I've done in years is kind of dive into my own cultural and ancestral background.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I've learned about kind of Christian Britain and pre-Christian Britain, and how spirituality and religion and power and politics is the connection. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's just popped out for a second, but Christianity, you were saying, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh. Ooh. Sometimes I
yeah.
yawn just the
Well, you got to keep
energy.
your yeah, you got to keep your energy up.
Mm. Yeah. So there's there are reasons why certain practices have been taken away from mainstream religions and the general population.
Hmm.
And my personal view is that it's, you know, if you went back to paganism in Britain and say witchcraft, like the people who were practicing the craft were like the pillars of their communities.
Hmm.
Like they were the spiritual link between the people and Mother Earth. And they had practices, and I would assume that those would include awakening the Kundalini, which they would have their own name for, and using that to form spiritual connections which would empower the people
Yeah,
and, you know, have a strong spiritually centered community. And I think that certain groups of people became disconnected from spirit and from those practices, wanted to consolidate power within themselves. Yeah, I'm kind of like royal families and things, you know,
yeah,
aristocracy and everything. Um, and there's lots of evidence of them deliberately targeting the witches because they were, you know, they were empowering their communities. So we need to weaken those communities.
that makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, and there was a lot of Christianity, like destroying pagan sacred sites, building churches on those sites, like as a direct kind of oppression of the pagan people, so that Christianity and the people who were in control of Christianity could then take power.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm sure that came from that, and then it became you're only human. Uh, don't try to do God's work, I guess, or that's for God to do, not for you.
mm,
I think it started out as sort of a church having power thing, and then the people now who don't believe in that, I think they definitely have this fear of nope, that's not your role. Your role is not to read. If that was meant to happen, God would take care of it and leave that to God.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes me think of like the way that certain figures within major religions are made it kind of exclusively divine.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, Jesus Christ can have experiences like that,
Yeah.
but yeah, not you. And if you try to, then you're a heretic and we'll burn you at the stake. Like
Which is what
literally.
yeah, which is what people think of mediums. A lot of people are very against it. And they're saying,
Mm,
first of all, you're letting in dark energies. And second of all, God doesn't want you to do that because, he'll talk to you directly. Or if he has a
mm,
message for you, he'll talk to you directly. So it does make sense that based on history, it becomes that of don't mess with that. That's for God. And we are just supposed to be the disciples and we're just the common man and that's it.
yeah, yeah, and I also um like when I think about like the witch burnings, like in the witch hunts and the millions of people who were murdered, like the traumatic toll of all of that, like it hasn't been resolved in
Right.
our communities, and it's just been passed on and passed on. And when I look at things like horror films that like demonize mediumship
Hmm.
um, or the other realms, it's like that is like a direct manifestation of that unresolved trauma. You know, it's just like coming out in these ways. And it's bad because it's separating us from these spiritual realms that have the potential to give us a lot of power and wisdom that we could use to um, help to cleanse our global systems at the
Yeah.
moment, which are so desperately in need of that.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. And I think that's sort of the root of why you do the work that you do, to help other people to discover this in themselves and find out who they really are. And um, I, how would you describe it in terms of what the benefits are of discovering the true nature of your soul? And then I have a second question I'll hold until you answer
yeah,
that.
yeah, thank you. Um, I'm just trying to think about it like from my own perspective. So first of all, like I wouldn't want to like sugarcoat it in a way that would kind of make it seem like it was a cure-all for every problem that somebody has.
Right.
Like um, what I've found is in myself and in other people who I respect, uh, it doesn't make you uh, it doesn't like make you transcend your humanness in a way where you're not human anymore. Like I feel more human than I've ever felt in my life, like way more connected with my humanity and with other humans and with the earth and our cosmos, like way more. And that can be painful, like because you're not just connected with the love and the joy, you're connected with pain and the suffering, and that evokes like, a need to take action. Like there's a sense of
Yeah.
unity, like a felt sense, which it naturally evokes the need to act against certain injustices and situations.
Yeah. And you just cut off a little bit, and where
Oh,
you were saying it doesn't just bring in the light, and I think you said sort of the light and the love, it also brings in the feeling of suffering and all of that stuff as well, which of
yeah,
course we all feel, especially, now seeing what's happening, and lots of terrible things happen all over the world, but seeing it so, just seeing it on a daily basis and thinking, how can people go so much against their nature? How can you do this to people? Like,
yeah,
what is the, it's shocking and upsetting.
definitely. I mean, one of the ways it's that learning has come on for me is through my ex-partner was a woman of color, and like understanding uh, supremacy and racism has been one of the big things for me in recent years,
Yeah.
and realizing that that's a global system. You know,
Hmm.
it's so much more than kind of like a white power rally. Like it's an
Yeah.
actual, it's like interwoven into the entire fabric of our world in ways that cause unbelievable harm. Um, so that's kind of what I'm referring to with this kind of like a sense of responsibility or a need to take action that is derived from a spiritual place, like
Yeah.
of open-hearted spiritual understanding, because that kind of dissolves all of the conceptual um, deceits that our culture is so filled with, including white supremacy, which dehumanizes people of color. And that can be dissolved by that spiritual sense of unity. And then there's just this open hearted recognition of another human being in suffering and the desire to end that. Um, I'm not sure if that was answering your question. I can't
Yeah, it
quite
did.
remember.
Yeah, it did. It's just an example of what the advantages of raising your consciousness, recognizing your own spirituality. I mean, you see these world leaders that do things like what's happening now. You just think, how have they gotten so far away from who they really are? Like,
Mm,
hurting another person is hurting yourself. We're all part of the same light. It doesn't matter
definitely.
what our corporeal envelope looks like, or what country we're born in, or what, ethnicity or religion. We're all the same matter. We're just
Mm,
these are just cases for our souls. And so you think, it what it's just so sad to see people not understanding that and making themselves separate or better, or it's very frustrating. And it's frustrating whether you're spiritual or not, but it becomes even more frustrating when you see, don't how can you not see this? How can you not see it? That
Yeah.
we're all meant to be light, and what are you doing? It's a corruption. And
Mm.
so, and the other question that I was leading to is, you had a very extraordinary reaction to this process. And it could be, well, first of all, I'd like to know why you think some people, is it sort of something that was like your chosen path? And so spirit was like, we're going to show this guy, because this was sort of his path. Um, do you think all people are capable of having the experience that, I guess you'd say yes, all people are capable, but does it happen very often? And does it happen with people that you work with? Do you actually lead them through this, or do you kind of say that might be too intense for you? We're going to do it a different way.
Yeah. Um, so with myself and my background, the only thing that makes all of my experiences make sense is that I've had very focused spiritual past lives. Um, I think I must have, because the way that I just knew how to meditate,
Yeah.
and that I hadn't had any understanding of spirituality, and I saw one spiritual teacher speak, and I had this really like life-changing experience. And I know that that happens to other people, but I assumed it would happen to literally everyone after it happened to me.
Hmm.
And I would show people that video, and I assumed they just had the same experience, and I was shocked when it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I think I've met people who have had Kundalini awakenings, and they've had them in a different way to the way that I've had it. So I think my mind is much more open about the different ways that it can happen.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's important to say as well, because there'll be people who will have actually had them and not realized that they've had them.
Right.
Um, and they could be reading up about it and being like, well, that doesn't sound like what happened to me. And
Hmm.
it's like, it's just because that's like a textbook kind of description. Like there's loads and loads of kind of alternate ways that it can happen. Um, and I think part of that is a difference between being male and being female. I think
Hmm.
that there's slightly different ways that it can happen. I've heard people refer to kind of the male energy as more like a mountain, like more suddenly coming up and down, whereas female energy being more like a valley, so a kind of slow rising,
Yeah.
which could um, it could mean that someone could go through some really profound shifts but not actually realize that it's happened because it's happened gradually.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And I liked what you said too about it possibly is a result of these focused past lives. And it's it's like all you had to do was watch the video to trigger the memory, to trigger the remembering
Yeah.
of, oh, I know how to do this. And I agree with you, because I've had little moments during meditation of, one of the things that actually triggered my spiritual awakening, and it was just for a flash. And I was meditating, and all of a sudden I transported to somewhere else, and it felt so real that
Mm,
I was laying in bed with my partner at the time, and I just went, something something just happened. And it
mm,
was like I just was in this totally different place, but it only lasted for I maybe shook myself out of it, but it felt like I was standing. It was like I'm meditating, and the next thing I'm standing in these woods, and it's snowy. And there are these
right.
they're like not street lamps because they're in the woods, but I'm looking through a house, and there were candles in the windows, and I was there. I
Wow.
felt that I was there, and I'd never had such a vivid experience
Mm,
before, where I went, my consciousness just went somewhere, whether it was a past life or a different dimension, or it was just like a Robert Frost poem scene. It felt like I was in a Robert Frost poem, like, whose woods these are, I think I know. And I just felt like I was back in time. It was so weird. And then I kind of went, oh, there's something to this. There's some other thing happening, and I'm excited about it. And that's kind of led me to sort of looking up all these little tiny things that have happened. Like I've mentioned 1,000 times on this podcast, seeing a blue orb appear as soon as I turned the light off when I was a kid. like this big blue neon glowing orb appeared over my bed. And I just kind
Mm.
of dismissed it for years. Like I screamed when it happened, I got freaked out and then never thought about it again. And then years later was like, wait a second, what was that? Then I have the little meditation experience. I'm like, what was that? Was I hallucinating? No. And so it opens you up, but it feels like you already knew how to do this instinctively, which is really cool. And I know that you said it was intense, and it's not necessarily, I would assume, something that you just want to dump on any old person, unsuspecting client or
Correct.
something, and say, we're going to do this now. And first
Yeah,
of all,
yeah,
expect it to happen. And second of all, that's a big responsibility because you don't know how it's going to mess with their psyche.
exactly. And um, like I see people kind of hunting after Kundalini awakening. Like there's
Yeah.
lots of groups online, and there's lots of people who are like really focused on that. And on one hand, like there's really wonderful reasons to do that, but on the other hand, there are um, risks and issues with that.
Hmm.
Um, like it's, I'm still recovering from that experience. Like my back is, I'm still recovering from all of that. I was out of work for 2.5 years, just because I just couldn't kind of manage that.
Yeah.
Um, it just to get back into well, just to kind of get back to normality maybe took about 5 years, you know. And the first year especially was really difficult, like nightmares almost every night, waking
Mm.
up sweating, just horrible. So, you know, things changed for me because I came into it with no understanding and no like work. Like normally you would do groundwork for years before you attempt to do something like that, like so that you've purified like your body and your mind, because what you're trying to do when you awaken your kundalini is raise your awareness. And if you suddenly raise your awareness but your body is filled with unresolved pains from childhood trauma, like it's going to be a tough time, because you
Mm.
can't just kind of turn it off once you've turned it on.
Yeah.
And if you went back 100 years ago, I doubt you would be able to find a teacher who would give you a teaching like this without first checking you out, making sure you were, capable, and then training you. Like there were really strict ways of doing that, because they must have seen the times where it went wrong, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and one of the videos I watched today, uh, it was, I forget which spiritual leader it was or speaker, and he said, "This is dangerous." It's not, I mean, he didn't say it from a perspective of it being negative, but he just said you need to be very careful because
Yeah,
it can be very dangerous. You're
yeah,
opening something up that's very big and bigger than you, and you can't just jump in without any kind of understanding of what it is. So that makes a lot of sense. But of course, we all want to know, what's that like? But it's like near death experiencers say, people say, I want to have a near death experience. And they say, no, you don't. Because while it had some amazing benefits, it also is very difficult to assimilate back into the 3D reality. And
yeah,
it can be very painful, and it can be very difficult to relate with other people. It can be difficult to
mm.
relate with the world. How do you just go into your 9 to 5 after that and just clickety clackety all day long? Like,
I
this,
know.
what is this? This is the Matrix. Don't you understand? It's like you just, and then everyone thinks you're nuts and you end up, being psychologically evaluated. So um, it is very exciting to, because it proves that there's something else beyond this
Yeah,
reality and this existence. How much of that do we really want to know? It's like, do you want to be, it's like the red pill or the blue pill.
yeah,
So
sure.
do you really want to go there?
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's really interesting. So when you work with your clients, I know you don't take them down this psychedelic crazy journey, but what is it that you kind of do? And of course, we're going to have a link below so that if you'd like to work, if you'd like to work, in this capacity, you can. So yeah, what would you say about that? What is it that you actually lead your clients through?
In many ways, one of the main ways that I focus is in the opposite direction. And what I mean by that is that a Kundalini awakening and many of the forms of awakening that are really popular, they're designed to promote like an up and out form of spiritual awakening.
Hmm.
Um, there's and that moves us towards this like divine masculine light that's above us, the Lord above kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's an overemphasis on that. And what's been happening to me more and more in recent years is rather than this up and out thing, I've been having a down and in experience. And it's been descending through my body. Like my body awareness is much, much brighter than it ever used to be. And down into Mother Earth. So feeling like the spirit of Mother Earth. And for me, what's happened, it's like I found this kind of divine above me and I've brought it down. And now it feels like the divine is Mother Earth herself. So that's how I um, feel it. And that makes the divine really real. Like sometimes when the divine is this kind of up and out thing, it can feel a bit detached, a bit disconnected, like the world isn't real, but this spirit is real.
Mm.
But it's like if you bring that spirit into the world, then the world becomes your divine, and then everything's divine, and it's really tangible and it's very grounding. And I feel like a lot of people, myself included, we need to ground our energies so that we can feel healthy. And this way of doing it, it's like rather than just grounding in order to calm our energies down, it's grounding to calm our energies, but also form a really powerful spiritual connection that is its own type of spiritual awakening. So um, it's more than a tool for kind of good health, but it has that as well. So that's kind of like how I focus. But the sessions are very individual. Like I, I do it intuitively. It's based on the light that I feel, and sometimes the light will speak through me to give advice. It really depends what the person brings and kind of where they want to go, and and how I can sense that, um, and just kind of guide it from there.
Yeah, I can understand that. Even in when I do mediumship readings, it is about bringing through loved ones, but occasionally there will, well, not even occasionally, I would say almost every time, there's some in the message is something that I feel compelled to say, and that I feel is coming from spirit and not me. That's perhaps
Mm,
life guidance, perhaps there's something happening with your work coming up, or there's something inside of you that you still need to resolve, or and then when I do that, I don't claim to know for sure, but I'll say this is what I feel. Does that resonate with you? Does that make sense to you? Because of course I allow for the fact that it could be coming from my own perceptions, my own
mm,
experience, my own judgments, but I can definitely say that I understand what you mean by intuitive, just intuiting what they need. And it's like
mm,
intuiting what the message is and what they need to hear today. And I think I've always said I kind of used to go to mediums instead of therapy. I did therapy too. I'm not saying don't go to therapy if you need it. And I think everyone should have a therapist if they can afford it and if it's viable for them. But I do think that there's value sometimes in just sitting with another person, having paying to have them have it be all about you, and having you working some stuff out with another person who's objective and doesn't know you as a
yeah.
as a friend. And I found that I got so much out of seeing mediums or psychics, even if I was like, even if they were their predictions or their ideas were incorrect, I got something out of bouncing ideas off somebody and kind
Mm,
of being able to hash things out and having them listen and kind of give back what they're hearing. And I just find it so valuable. But add to that then the spiritual component, which I believe is very real, that there
mm,
is some kind of divinely guided, not that you're some kind of a saint or, I'm some kind
mm.
of a prophet, but just we all have the ability to channel divinely inspired information to another person, which I think can be very valuable.
Absolutely. And And we can like be a conduit, you know, when we're energetically sensitive and we've got an open heart and we can feel the other person's energy inside our heart.
Yeah.
Like if they aren't at a stage yet where they're able to form a deep connection with Mother Earth so that their energy can move down to Mother Earth to be released, we can serve as that um, vehicle by kind of taking their energy into us and channeling it down. That's
Yeah.
a lot of what I do, and I'll just be silent, you know, and I'm just in this state of really deep listening and focus, um, and I just feel the energy flow. And it's strange for me because I was training to be a doctor for 3 years, and then I worked in psychological research. So my background is not one that says that this is possible, you know,
Yeah.
that this is how healing can happen. Like healing needs to be something that you work out in your mind and then you apply physically, not that you can kind of bear witness and be still, and that is really productive. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it goes against that whole kind of Western way of viewing life.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And in conclusion, because I love the way that you said that, I wanted to know, even though this whole kind of discussion has been about this, just in a nutshell, after having had this experience, what do you understand about the nature of existence, the meaning of life, and what do you want people to know?
That's a that's a big.
Broad question, but yeah, anything that comes to mind.
So, this will be difficult. I might cry or something because like the way that everything's opening up for me and the way it's opening up more and more, like it's a really deep, heartfelt experience. Um, for me, like the center of it for me right now is Mother Earth. Like um, realizing that she is alive in a more real way than we are, like that she is spiritual, you know, that she has a spiritual heart, and that she is literally our mother, like even scientifically, but that it's so much deeper than that. Like we're cells in her body, you know, and um, she's like bathing us in this loving, heartfelt energy. And what I would love people to get from this is how real that connection is that we have with her. It's not an idea, it's a really real, tangible connection that you can feel. And I think that a huge amount of what we're suffering through at the moment is because we don't have that connection. And I think the religious texts of all over the world talk about how we've lost that connection. You know, when we left the Garden of Eden um, in Christianity, it's we've lost that. But there are many indigenous cultures that have been keeping that alive for thousands of years and have been trying to tell white Western people that actually, you know, Mother Earth is our mother, and you can connect to her through your feet. You can feel her energy. And when you do that, her energy changes you. It's like you return to her and it can resolve so many difficulties. Um, so the nature of reality, I mean, I would say it's all alive. It's all alive. Um, but the center of that aliveness for me as a human being is Mother Earth and the cosmos, which is like mother's mother.
Ah, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for sharing your story, your insights, your experience. I think it's so interesting and something that not a lot of people are talking about. And or if they are, it's sort of more of a niche a niche thing.
mm,
And it's really interesting to hear. Even more convincing to me is when you do encounter someone like you who was an atheist, scientific minded.
yeah,
And I was that way for some years during my life as well. I think that's why I approach all of this with sort of more of a level head, where I think it is really important to have a healthy skepticism about a lot of this stuff. But once I saw that, in my belief, it is real, and I've talked to so many other people like you that would never have sometimes the things that come out of my mouth, I think, oh, I would have rolled my eyes at that years ago. I would have thought
mm,
this person was crazy.
yeah,
And it's like you said, you kind of have to build up to it. It's not sometimes, back in the day, if I heard someone talking about angels, I was like, "Pff, yeah, right. I mean,
yeah,
that's so hokey." And, or using this language of higher light beings. And I'd be like, okay, they're on drugs. They're nuts. But
mhm,
now I'm like, oh no, this is very real to me anyway. And to so many people. And so I really am doing this. I'm doing this because I love the topic. It it's the connections that I have with you type so many wonderful spiritual people. I don't even want to say spiritual, just people that have had
mm,
spiritually transcendent experiences. But also, I do it because I do think it's important to put the word out. Some may not receive it, and that's okay. That's not their path. But just to make the information available for the curious, for the seekers, if you do want to learn more and realize that people are like you, very normal, are having these experiences, and explain them away if you like or don't. But I think it's just the more people speak about it, the more commonplace it becomes, and the more
mm,
we can seek to heal our world, which is the ultimate goal, is hopefully it sounds like a pretty daunting task to convince everybody that you are light, you are love. I'm talking to you, Putin, like you are you are a light being and you are love, and yet you're not acting that way. And so it's just I think it's really important. And so thank you for doing the work both with your clients but also by putting it out there. And also we risk people judging us or criticizing us or telling us we're crazy. It doesn't matter. I know I don't care. I used to be someone that cares very much what people think, but in this realm, I don't care.
mm.
I'm proud, and I'm proud of it. You can think I'm nuts, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's a really daunting thing for me to be talking about this. I think because I was so conditioned into that scientific mindset,
Yeah,
it's it takes a long time to kind of to undo some of that. So it's taken a lot for me to speak out kind of publicly about the things that I've been experiencing. But I felt really called to do it. Like it kind of life conspired to make it the only option that I had really.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm very glad that I'm doing it. It's really cathartic for me to be sharing this, and I really want to, and I can feel spirit moving through me and just being like, you know, I want you to do this,
yeah.
and,
I
that's
think that's
lovely.
why. Yeah, it is lovely, and I think that's why people have these experiences. Seems like everyone I've spoken with pretty much said that was the goal, for spirit to open us, the people that have experienced these things, and then to share the information. And
Mm,
fortunately, now we won't be burned at the stake. So
yeah.
at least not physically. Maybe people may have their opinions,
Metaphorically.
but so far, I know that people that disagree with my theories don't say anything to me about it because they know they like me. They know I'm a good person and I'm
Mm,
very well adjusted, and they just go, "Okay, that's weird." But so far I've received no hate except for random strangers on the internet that I don't care about, that tell me that it's heresy and evil, or that I'm, full of it. And I'm like, "Okay, well, I said to somebody recently that left a comment saying, "Oh, great, just what we need, more fakes in the world," or
oh,
more.
wow.
And I just and of course, I got sort of angry and then just wrote. I actually don't ever respond to people when but I just said, "You know what, I'm going
Mm,
to," and I said, "You know what I would just suggest," or I said something. I'd love to open up the idea that, to you, this isn't real, and I respect that, and that's your knowledge and reality. To me, this is very real. I don't go into this as a fake. I go into this with pure authenticity and from my heart, and because I care about people and I want to serve them. If you don't believe in the same thing, that is perfectly okay. That is, I respect your opinion about it. But I just said, I would just offer that um,
Mm,
to the people that do this work, it is real. And we are coming, most of us are coming from a very authentic and loving place, and from the kindness of our hearts. So, um, that was just sort of like food for thought, and left it at that, that it's okay not to believe in it. I didn't believe in it either at one point, and I didn't really go to, it's not really necessary to name call or label people because you don't think something is real.
mm, yeah.
But that's just what, but it's worth it. I think it's worth it to put it out there, and let those people have their own path. That's fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've all got our own path and we'll all find it one way or another. That very same person could end up a couple of weeks later, like having some sort of transformative experience and having a
Yeah.
completely radical shift in their consciousness. It's so, if what happened to me has taught me anything, it's that like anyone can go through something like this, and you
Yeah.
wouldn't really be able to predict who that
Yep.
person was.
And you know what? One day they're going to cross over to the other side, and I'll say, I told you so. See, but,
Yeah.
but thank you so much. I really appreciate your vulnerability and for being here. And it's so lovely to connect with you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been really lovely to share like this and for you to hold space. It's really nice.
Such a pleasure. Take care.